We're in Parashah Shelach, which is Bamidbar 13, 1 to 3. That's Numbers 13, 1 to 3. And I want to start with the Aliyah here, reading 13, 1 through 3, and then 16 through 24. Adonai said to Moshe, "Send men on your behalf to reconnoiter the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each ancestral tribe, send someone who is a leader in his tribe." Moshe dispatched them from the Paran desert, as Adonai had ordered, all of them leading men among the people of Israel. And then jump down to verse 16. These are the names of the men Moshe sent out to reconnoiter the land. Moshe gave to Hoshea, the son of Nun, the name Yehoshua. And this change comes along because Hoshea literally means salvation. It's very similar to, carries the same meaning as Yeshua, salvation. He changes the name, however, from salvation to Yehoshua, which is Joshua in English, and that means the Lord is salvation. Okay? And I think there's a reason for that, and I think one of the main reasons that this transpires at this point in time is because he didn't want Joshua to be seen as the savior, because Joshua is going to take these people into the promised land. Okay? He and Caleb, and he doesn't want the people thinking that Joshua is the guy. He wants Joshua's name to reflect the idea that the Lord is the Savior. Okay?
Amen.
Moshe, in verse 17, Moshe sent them to reconnoiter the land of Canaan, instructing them, "Go on to the Negev and into the hills, and see what the land is like. Notice the people living there, whether they are strong or weak, few or many, and what kind of country they live in, whether it's good or bad, and what kind of cities they live in, open or fortified. See whether the land is fertile or unproductive, and whether there is wood in it or not. Finally, be bold enough to bring back some of the fruit of the land." When they left, it was the season for the first grapes to ripen. They went up and reconnoitered the land from the Zin desert to Rehob, near the entrance to Hamat. They went up into the Negev and arrived at Hebron, Achiman, Shishai, and Ptolemy. The Anakim lived there. And a footnote, Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. In other words, Hebron is a very, very old city.
Right.
They came to the Eshcol Valley, and there they cut off a branch bearing one cluster of grapes, which they carried on a pole between two of them. They also took pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol, which means cluster, because of the cluster which the people of Israel had cut down there. It's interesting that the Israeli Ministry of Travel this is their emblem. It's two guys with a pole on their shoulders with a huge cluster of grapes. Okay, and it's interesting. We won't get into this too much today, but it's interesting to note that the Anakim, the giants, inhabited Canaan at this point in time. And we have reports all through history of these giants and how they had manipulated GMOs and DNA and all that kind of stuff. In fact, that is the spirit of the Nephilim, and we're witnessing it today, the spirit of the Nephilim. And it's dealing in things that we really have no business dealing in. And the accounts that we have of the giants is that they ate so much because they were so big that they were eating all the food in the land, including the inhabitants of the land. Buffalo Bill Cody in his diary, I've shared this with you, shared from I think it was the Pawnee tribe, their tradition that the giants had run through the plains and would chase down the buffalo and grab a buffalo under one arm while running and rip the limbs off and eat them while they were running. And this is in Buffalo Bill Cody's diary, okay, which is very interesting. So the idea was they ate so much they began fooling around with all of the genetic stuff and making their food larger. And we kind of have a picture of that here with these huge clusters of grapes. Why else how could you explain the size of grapes? Grapes being the size of oranges or whatever. That's pretty huge. So that's just kind of a background idea, but they've gone into the land now and they've spied it out. And so we want to talk about this transaction here because this is very important to us. And actually, a lot of people misunderstand some things here, so hopefully we can get this squared away today. Let's go to now verse 25 in chapter 13. And we're going to read 25 through 33 from the Complete Jewish Bible. They've sent the spies out. Moshe sent the spies out. 40 days later, they returned from reconnoitering the land. And they went to Moshe, Aaron, and the entire community of the people of Israel at Kadesh in the Paran Desert, where they brought back word to them and to the entire community and showed them the fruit of the land. Okay, so you can just imagine that the spies gone out. These are renowned leaders in each of the tribes, so they're well known. And the people are anxiously awaiting their arrival. They don't have any clue when they're coming back. It's not like Moshe said, go out and spend and then come back. They're waiting anxiously each day for the return of these spies. And here they come on the 40th day. You can imagine the word goes through the camp like wildfire. They're back. And you should see the grapes they're carrying. And there's a lot of excitement in the camp. And they all crowd around Moshe as close as they can get to hear this report. Okay? In verse 27, what they told him was this: we entered the land where you sent us, and indeed it does flow with milk and honey, and here's the fruit. Here's the proof. However, the people living in the land are fierce, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakim there. The Anakim lives in the area of the Negev. The Hittite and the Yevusi and the Emori live in the hills, and the Canaani live by the sea and alongside the Jordan. Now, all of these are tribes of giants, every single one of them. So let's stop right there for a second. And I wanted to share this. A lot of people get confused and think, well, this is the negative report. This is not the negative report. This is a factual report. This is what Moshe commissioned them to do. He commissioned them, he said, go and see what the land is like. Notice the people that are living there, whether they're strong or weak. So they come back and say, well, they look pretty strong. They're giants, right? He says, and then he commissioned them, and what kind of country did they live in? So they tell him, the different tribes, where they're at, so on and so forth. Is it good or bad? What kind of cities? Well, they're fortified cities. They're huge cities. See whether the land is unproductive or whether there's wood or not. And so obviously they come back and they report this. So just giving this factual report is not a negative report. And a lot of believers get confused with this. They say, well, how are you feeling? Well, I don't feel too good today. I rebuke that. Why? We have this notion that that's a negative confession. No, it isn't. It's just a fact. There's giants in the land. I can report those facts all day long, and it doesn't sway my faith. The issue is about to come. The issue hasn't been breached yet. We have to understand that because we get a little too spooky sometimes. We go, well, I can't, how are you feeling? I can't tell you. What? Why can't you tell me? Well, I don't want to confess anything or speak anything in. No, you're not speaking. If you're that convinced you can speak things in that easily, start speaking in $1 million to your bank account. Right? You just can't speak things into existence that easily. It has to be linked with faith. It doesn't have to be linked with facts. Does that make sense? Very, very important that we get this. You ask for prayer and then you say, well, I can't tell you what I need prayer for. Well, then go get somebody else to pray. This is craziness. Just tell me what's going on. You're not confessing it. You see that? All they're doing is coming back. Now, Moshe says, well, what are the people like? Well, the people living there are fierce. They're huge. He says, tell me what the cities are like. They're fortified. How's the land? Oh, it flows with milk and honey. Here's the fruit to prove it. You see what I'm saying? And so all they're doing is coming back with this report, okay? Now, as we follow this progression, we're going to see where it goes south. Because if it went south for them at this point, this is where it's going to go south for us as well. It's a thin line. So, they say in verse 30, Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, we ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There's no question we can conquer it. Now, how many remember reading in this parashah that Caleb was a man with a different spirit? Remember that? Now, what's happening here is he is discerning we're starting to slip from a factual report into problems. We run into this in the eldership all the time because one of our jobs is to talk about you. You're the sheep. Does that make sense? We have to, okay, what's the pulse? Where's everyone at? What's going on? If there's a problem, we have to hear the facts. Why are these two people fighting? What's going on here? We need to hear the facts. All we're doing is throwing those facts out so we can begin to make some discerning choices. However, as long as we remain discerning, there comes a point in time when you can, because how many know we all have an opinion, right? If you're a human being, you have an opinion. All right? And in and of itself, that's neither good or bad, but you have an opinion. So we're talking facts. Here's these two people in a fight in the body. Whose fault is it? Well, you already have an opinion on that. And as soon as you start to lay out your opinion, you're starting to cross over into uncharted territory. And you have to be really careful, and so you have to discern it. And we have, at times, said, time out, guys. We're starting to cross some boundaries here. We have to stop because our opinions are getting thrown into the mix. And God, quite honestly, no one's interested in your opinions. How's that for deflating the bubble, right? Yeah, they are irrelevant, and you know what? They're a waste of time for most people to hear your opinion on things. And they're extremely dangerous. Deanna?
Well, I was reading, as you read just verse 1, it says, Adonai said to Moshe, send men on your behalf to reconnoiter the land. It would have been different if they were sent on his behalf, don't you think?
Well,
I know what it's saying, but it's still...
It could have been, and that's actually discerned differently by the rabbis. Some say, that the Lord ordered them to go, and other people say Moshe wanted them to go. And so there's some difference on that. Pass that mic over to Pastor Vince there.
Gives them a different
Yeah.
take on it.
I was just going to share that in verse 22. If you go back to verse 22, it says, they ascended in the south,
Yeah.
plural. They ascended. And then it says, and he arrived at Hebron in the singular. The he is Caleb. The rabbis tell us that he went up to Hebron and he prayed before the matriarchs and the patriarchs.
Yeah.
That he would find favor and he'd be protected. And so when I read that, it's like, that is who they're talking about. The one singular person was Caleb, and he did find favor.
Yeah, and Hebron is the modern day city Hebron. It's in the south, and it's controlled by the Palestinians at this point in time. And that's, of course, where the patriarchs and the matriarchs are buried. And Hebron literally means communion, the place of communion. It's also called the Kiryat Arba, which is the city of four, because it talks about Abraham. Well, it comes up with the four because of the four patriarchs and matriarchs that are buried there, although there's more than that. So the city of communion, it's also interesting to note that when the dividing of the land goes forth and everybody's given their own portion, this particular portion goes to Caleb. And Caleb is a Gentile. So here we have a picture of the Gentile communing or living with the Jew. So it's a perfect picture of the one new man. And so when we see that, thanks for pointing that out, Vince. That's a good point. Very important to us, for sure. Kent?
Is the second holiest place for Jews. When you say that he was a Gentile, but he was a Gentile converted to Judaism as the Jews were.
Yeah.
It wasn't like today there are Hebrew Christian, Messianic Jews or something like that. He went along with what the Jews did at the time.
Yeah, we assume that he converted. Of course, the rabbis teach that. They wouldn't teach anything other than that.
Right.
But whether he converted or not, biologically, he is a Gentile. And that becomes very important to the one new man scenario, okay? Because here we see this Gentile living with them. Sorry, I'm fooling around here. I'm getting all tangled up in this cord. And so he inherits this portion of land. By the way, it's also interesting to note that Hebron is in the tribal allocation for Judah. So now we see the Gentile grafted in through the tribe of Judah. And of course, this just works perfectly with the Brit Hadashah. Colette?
Okay, a couple things. First, I'm not completely convinced that Caleb was a Gentile.
Yeah, lots of people aren't.
I'm not sure. I'm still kind of searching that out. The other part, though, is we have to be really careful when we talk about, especially in this time, converting to Judaism, because it's anachronistic. There's no Judaism at this time. They're a tribal people who are becoming a nation.
Yeah.
God has set them apart.
Yeah.
There's no Jews or Judaism at this time.
Right.
So there's nobody can convert. There are people who believed and left with them to go into the land. But
yeah, and that's why I said the rabbis, they always point it towards their tradition and their favor. There's only Israelites at this point, and it is a mixed multitude. That we know. So the idea that Caleb is a Gentile is, like so many other things, is a debated topic. I personally believe he was. I actually got into about a 4-hour debate with Amnon Shore about it. Amnon Shore, if you see anything in the movies or TV or documentaries on the Hebrew that has to do with the Hebrew language, he is one of the leading experts in the Hebrew language in the world, and he was my mentor for many years. And we debated about 4 hours, and he finally said, "You know what? You're right." And he invited me up to his congregation to begin speaking up in Fresno. So I may not have convinced you, but I did convince him. No, I know. And it's a very in-depth study. It doesn't really matter one way or the other in the foundational sense, but it is important to us because it now establishes the one new man, really literally from the very beginning of things. So with that, we can build on that understanding. Sharon?
Just a question, is this also the very same area where the cave of Machpelah is?
That's exactly where it is.
Okay.
That's in Hebron. In fact, the big church, have you ever seen the big church thing that's built there? It's built over the cave.
Okay.
And we've never been to Hebron. It's dangerous to go there.
Yeah, there's a sign about
Yeah.
3 miles out from there that says, enter at your own risk.
Yeah, we've never been able to go down there. I was told once I could go down, but I had to put an Arab head covering on and put a Quran on the dashboard. Otherwise you were jeopardizing yourself. So, and of course they've trashed the whole place. So
They would likely have to excavate anyway, no? I mean, while the years have passed by.
well, they could if they wanted to get down, but this is the traditional site of the cave where, the rabbis teach that Adam and Eve are buried there, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Leah. So 6 of them. Of course, Rachel is buried up at Bethlehem. We have seen her grave.
That's another city that's trashed.
That's another city that is just, if we ever go back to Israel, we won't go back to Bethlehem. It's got a 60-foot wall around it now, all the way around, just to keep the Palestinians in. And you go in there, and it's filthy, dirty. It's just kind of disgusting, actually. So it's too bad because when we went there the first few times, we still saw the mourners at Rachel's tomb, still out there to this day, weeping and wailing over her all day long. It's pretty phenomenal. We haven't seen that the last couple of times we've gone, but so Abraham.
I just kind of wanted to.
Did you press it? Is it green?
Yeah, that's on. Check. So I wanted to touch on. I'm sorry, I'm not good with names. But what she was mentioning about the Judeans and that. That that's kind of non-existent right now. But the other day I was watching Reuters news channel. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But they were saying something about a tribe of Manasseh that is identified in somewhere in India, and that Israel recognizes them as an actual one of the many tribes of Israel, and that they were to migrate back into Israel.
Yeah.
And I just kind of found it interesting, and I just kind of felt the Spirit telling me, like, oh, he's bringing all these people back together, as it's mentioned.
That's what's prophesied.
And the other thing was, isn't the word Jew like a new word? Like it's really, it's either just Judean or Israelite, no?
Well, that's an argument also. Rabbi Shaul Paul says that he's a Jew. So the term goes back at least to that century.
First King.
First Kings.
That's when they first used the term.
Okay.
The split, they had to
Yeah,
differentiate the
yeah,
south and the north.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's a whole nother issue because they had a civil war. So the south was Judah and the north was Israel.
Oh, okay. Judean.
So it really became like our Civil War. We had the Federals and the Confederates, but they were all Americans.
Right.
And then with the Jew, it also boils down to whether you're talking biological or whether you're talking some other issue. So the interesting thing is nobody really knows who a Jew is because it's really not an ethnicity because every ethnic group in the world has Jews in it. It's not really a religion because people are referred to as Jews that aren't religious at all. And so, and this became a real problem under Adolf Hitler's regime because they wanted to get rid of all the Jews. The problem was they didn't know who Jews were. So they defined it. And they defined it that if one of your grandparents was Jewish by blood, you are Jewish. And that has stuck to this day. That's how we define a Jew to this day. If one of your grandparents was Jewish, then you're Jewish. We know that biologically it all comes down through the mitochondria, which comes from the woman. This is why the rabbis teach that if your mother's Jewish but your father isn't, you're a Jew. Or you have to convert. The Bible goes with the male genealogy to determine because that's the spiritual side. So it breeds a total massive amount of confusion for us. And I think God did that purposely because otherwise we would have bigger problems than we already have, knowing who's who and what's what. Now it's a matter of, okay, Paul refers to us in Galatians chapter 6 as all being spiritual Israel. And it really is in my opinion, a safer method or road to travel because now we are identifying ourselves as those who are striving with God. And I use that in the positive term, not the negative, although the negative applies too. But we are walking with God, and so it doesn't matter. And this is why in the Brit Hadashah we come along, we read, there is no male, no female, no Jew, no Gentile. And yet, I look out here and we're not confused like the left. I know who the females are and I know who the males are.
That's your opinion.
That is my opinion. I understand that. But it is a biological fact. So you can see the problems that have arrived. Okay, let's go ahead and let's get back into Numbers 13 here. So in verse 30, Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, we ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There's no question we can conquer it. So he realizes that this reporting of facts is starting to get close to the edge. He's a man of a different spirit. He's discerning this. And you and I have to do the same thing because, listen, every day of the week, you talk about things. If you're a parent, you talk about your children. And it's not all peaches and cream. You have to deal with issues that are not good. They're not godly. And you have an opinion about that. So you're talking about it. But you've got to have that different spirit so you can discern you know what, we're getting close to crossing into the Lashon Hara here, the evil tongue, and off a little bit, clear our heads, get our own opinions out of the mix, and deal just with the facts. And that's what Caleb is doing here. So the evil report hasn't yet come. It's only been an actual report with really no, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think there's been any alternative motive to breed, fear and stuff. I think they're just coming, they're excited to be back. They're reporting the facts, and then they start, their feelings and their emotions start to enter in. Verse 31. So as soon as Caleb says this, the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack these people because they are stronger than we are. Now they've crossed the line. Okay? And they're crossing the line because Caleb, the man of a different spirit, has kind of pushed it to this point in the sense he says, we got to back off now, guys. Let's chill out here and let's stay calm. Let's keep our heads on straight. And they don't want to hear that. So they allow their emotions to enter in. Now, how many know your emotions are neither right or wrong necessarily?
It's like fear and flight.
Fear and flight, it's, but your emotions are highly contagious.
Yes.
I mean, one person that breaks out into laughter or something can get a whole room laughing. One person that comes in here with an attitude can ruin the whole day for everybody. It's just how it is. And so we have to really be careful with this. Make sense?
Yes.
So he says the other spy is saying, we can't attack these people. They're too much bigger than us and they're stronger than we are. And they spread a negative report about the land they had reconnoitered for the people of Israel by saying, the land we passed through in order to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people we saw there were giant. Okay, now, this is their opinion. How do they know the land devours everybody that lives there? They don't know that. For starters, all the people we saw were giants. There was other people that lived there that weren't giants. The giants were specific tribes. And there were people, remember by the time David comes on the scene, Goliath and his 5 brothers are kind of what's left, and the rest of the Philistines just look like normal men. And yet the Philistines were a giant tribe initially. Okay? So they're now throwing in their opinions and their attitudes coming into this. It devours everybody that goes in there. We were lucky to get out. And I'm sure the stories started flying. Man, I had 5 of those giants chasing me, and I outran them, and I hid, and they were lifting up the boulders looking for me. You can imagine the stories that started to go from this point. And the people are starting to get freaked out. Let me just read this last verse, and then we'll get. We saw the Nephilim, the descendants of Anak, who was from the Nephilim. To ourselves, we look like grasshoppers by comparison, and we look that way to them too. And the book of Enoch tells us that some of the giants measured 3,000 ells tall. Now, it's a little hard to discern what an ell is, but many of the experts feel that 3,000 of them measures to about 450 feet tall. A telephone pole is only 40 feet tall. They're saying that, an ell is like a cubit, but it's a different form of measurement, and so 3,000 of them, many of the experts say, would be 450 feet tall. So whether that is the case or not is debatable, but the idea is, when they say we were grasshoppers by comparison, they weren't just whistling Dixie. Even if they were only 40 feet tall. Go stand next to a telephone pole this afternoon and see what that looks like. This guy could have just lifted up his leg and stomped on you like a bug.
Well, when Enoch wrote his book, that was, of course, before Noah,
Yeah.
and most of the giants were destroyed at that time. But even if, you know, do you think that these giants were doing the same thing as in Noah's time? I mean, they were eating the people,
Yeah, well,
devouring the people.
that's what Enoch writes.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I could see why the spies would be very fearful.
Yeah, now whether they witnessed that or not is hard to say. But there was lots of stories because we saw the Nephilim, the descendants of Anak. So in other words, we saw these guys we've heard about. And they had to get close because they had to steal some fruit.
Yeah.
So they had to go to somebody's vineyard. Think about that. These grapes weren't growing out in the wild, I don't think. I think they were in a vineyard being cultivated, and they went and stole them. So they got fairly close to civilization. So they obviously saw them. They were able to name. How did they name these guys? They must have gone close enough to get some information. Okay, who's living in this village? Well, we're going to have to go down there and find out. So they went down and they found out, oh my gosh, it's the Emori. I've heard about them. We better get out of here. You know what I mean? So if you put yourself into that story, you begin to, it kind of comes to life for you a little more.
I was just going to suggest that, well, for one thing, when you talk about they weren't just growing wild, I'm thinking it did grow wild out there. And the reason is the whole land of Israel was so fertile. It was, the ground was, today if you go to Jericho, it's like, what even grows out here?
Yeah.
You know, same thing with the Gaza, but it's because the people aren't living there. Once the people retain their land, then it's going to be fertile again. But what I was going to suggest is when they went into this land, you're wondering, why would they bring back a bad report? Because if they don't go into this land, where are they going to go? And I think that might have been the sin. The sin is, here it is again, in a roundabout way, they're suggesting, let's go back to Egypt.
Yeah, well, they actually say that at one point. You know, let's appoint for ourselves, I think it's chapter 14? Yeah, let's appoint for ourselves a leader, 14:4, to return to Egypt. How quickly they want to return to Egypt. And again, Egypt is symbolic of the world. So we have the same problem. We come in to the newness of the Lord, and then we run face to face with the giants in our life. And some of the giants in our lives seem like they're 400 feet tall. They're huge. They're insurmountable obstacles. And they're threatening to us. And so what do we want to do? We want to go back oftentimes. Back to what's familiar. Back to Egypt. You know, I always say this, you know, the Lord isn't the only one that never changes. The Lord never changes, the devil never changes, and human nature never changes. Human nature is the same today as it was 4,000 years ago. We're about to hear from the infamous Maria.
It says that they were picked because they were powerful and the most righteous in their tribe.
Yeah.
So would you consider or say that they could be like the very select, that at the end times they sort of get deceived?
Restate that. I'm not quite sure I'm following.
It says that at the end times, even the very elect will be could be deceived.
I think that's very possible. You're right. These guys are they're cream of the crop. These are not slouches. These are people who have a lot of influence. You know, we in the congregation, you know, influencer is one of the 4 personality types. There are people that are just influencers, and Kathleen and I often, if we want something to spread through the congregation, we'll tell an influencer.
Professional lobbyist.
And I'm not saying they run around gossiping. They can gossip, but if they're mature, what they do is they influence. Anybody that has a business uses the same principle. They see people that are natural born leaders. People follow them for whatever reason, and they're not necessarily the most knowledgeable in their area or their arenas or whatever, but they have a following. People follow them, people listen to them, people pay heed to what they say. And these people, I'm sure, were all influencers. And of course, we see the negative side of that in the report when they return. But these guys were reliable people. That was another thing that gave credence to it. I mean, if you'd sent some driftball out to spy the land, they came back with this report, you go, well, you know, this person's just a weirdo. And you wouldn't believe them. That's just him. He always has a weird opinion about something, right? But when you send somebody that is considered to be stable and solid and credible, and they come back, now the people listen to that. They go, okay, you know, Mike got a little excited with the 5 giants chasing after him, you know, and he outran them all, but he's a credible person. And we do the same thing today, don't we? We size people up, and we come to an understanding that they're either credible or they're not credible. I mean, there's Christian teachers that I won't listen to because I don't think they're credible people. They know the scriptures, but they're not credible to me. And and that's just my opinion. I'm not saying they aren't credible. I don't know, but they don't seem it to me. And we all do that, right? Colette.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you were saying that there's gonna be there are 4 priorities that we're looking at right now.
4 priorities?
The missions and evangelism was one of the
Oh yes, right.
priorities. And in that area, if you've been around that, you know, that sphere that's really about missions and evangelism, that's one of the things that is paramount. You find the person who is like a point person,
Yeah.
and you pour a lot of your time and energy and your resources
Right.
into influencing the influencer,
Right.
because you know that once they're
Yeah.
won over, that they have that power to pull other people, or to at least have people have the ear.
Yeah.
And if you go after, a lot of people say, well, you're going to go after the stragglers or the people that are not that influential, or the kind of that in the periphery
Right.
of the society. You're going to completely turn everybody off, because what you're doing is saying it only appeals to the fringe.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Avraham.
Well,
You got to use the mic because people can't hear you online.
how would you define?
Turn it on. It's not on. There you go.
So you had mentioned the word credible. How would you define what makes a person credible?
Well, credible, it would be somebody that when they tell you something, it turns out to be true. You know, they're credible. Yeah, that would be the simplest definition I could think of it off the top. But yeah, their character, yeah. Character is a huge part of our faith, guys. You can't ignore character. Character is what makes somebody credible in the faith, right? So they've got to have they got to be up to a certain standard or level to be considered to be credible and to have godly character.
like, for a long time, or not very long, but I wish I could say a very long time. But, like, I kind of, I liked, Charles E. Stanley. Would you say he's credible?
Yeah, he's credible.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's been around forever and a day. He's tried, proven, tested. Yeah, he's credible.
I just find a little confusion with the fact that I've come to learn and been led to this congregation itself,
Yeah.
of how I'm noticing from the introduction to the complete Jewish Bible
That's good,
that I've
isn't
been
it?
reading, yes, and then comparing the scriptures from one from the other, of how, yes, all these Greek mindset
yeah.
Bibles, they do deviate from the truth and teach a pagan Jesus.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but let me say this. I don't agree with Stanley on most of his doctrine, but that doesn't mean he's not credible, in my opinion.
Okay.
There's a huge difference. I will quote people that I disagree with all the time because they're credible people, but I just disagree with them. There's nothing wrong with disagreements. Two credible people can have disagreements over nearly everything. Yeah, you'll hear me often. I'll say, you know what? I don't know whether this is right or not, but this person does their homework. What I'm saying to you is this person's credible. I may not agree with what their conclusion, but they're a credible individual, and they're worth listening to. It doesn't mean you're buying into it. So when you're reading, like Stanley or J. Vernon McGee, or I mean, nearly all of Christianity, you have to understand they're coming from a different vantage point, but it doesn't mean they're not credible believers.
Right.
They're just not where you're at. And likewise, you're credible, but you're not where they're at. So we have to really discern that carefully, otherwise we can get ourselves into trouble.
Thank you.
I think the most effective evangelist in the 80s was Mike Warnicki
Quite possibly.
for bringing kids to the Lord.
Yeah.
And he was a total fraud.
Yeah, I know.
But the scripture goes forth and it will not come back void.
Yeah, the word, that's such a good point. The word of the Lord never returns void. It doesn't matter who preaches it. And the reason for this is because none of us have all the truth. We're all wingnuts. You know what I mean? What can I tell you? And when we get to heaven and the Lord is teaching the Torah study, I think, Maria, you better not say Pastor Bruce said this. If you do, I'm going to throw something at you. You know, I think we're going to get to heaven and find out, guys, we were making the best attempt we knew how to make.
At least she gives dates.
I know. But I think we're going to, I don't think anyone's going to stand up and say, "Ah, that's not what the Hebrew says. Are you kidding me?" No one's going to do that. You know what I mean? We're going to have our minds blown and go, oh my gosh. I wasn't even scratching the surface. And I don't care what persuasion we come out of. I think we're all going to be in the same shoes. And we're all going to realize, okay, maybe we were close here. Over here we weren't even in the ballpark. You know, I think that's what we're going to discover. And I think we're going to be mature enough. We're all going to laugh we're all going to get a pretty good laugh probably at the wedding feast. And then break out in spontaneous praise to the King of Kings because we're even there. Because at that point you're going to realize, I'm not sure I should even be here. You know what I mean? So, all right, Sharon?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay, oh, Frank. All right. Frank's got the mic. Pay
Yeah,
attention.
Is it on? Okay. This concept of the influencer in the congregation, that would seem like it would concern the pastor, especially the head pastor, a little bit, because it's probably be a dominant personality. Like maybe the pastors are dominant personalities. I don't know if that's a good way to describe them or not, but it seems to me that has the potential to lead to a lot of church splits, and in fact has led to a lot of church splits, probably. As a matter of fact, even this congregation, maybe.
We've gone through several splits, and it's always been led by an influencer.
So yeah, so that's not really. So you have to keep an eye on.
Well, you have to. Yeah, people like pastors have been vetted. So pastors have proven their credibility. And we have we have a large leadership in our pastors and elders, and we have a lot of different thoughts and ideas. I don't agree with a lot of things that we come up with. There's a lot of mixed opinion in there. But our leadership is credible, and they are influencers. They're strong people. What brings problems into a congregation, in this case, or a business or a family or whatever, is an influencer that doesn't have the character or the maturity, and
or share the vision.
Or share the vision. Kathleen and I can usually spot them after they've only been here once or twice. We just went through this with somebody else, and we said, this person's not going to make it here. And sure enough, they were here about a month and a half. You can just spot them because of who they are, where they're at in their maturity level. I'm not saying they're bad people. In fact, I like them. These are likable people. Influencers are likable people. You know what I'm saying? It's just they don't have that maturity and that credibility and that character that's needed.
Well, or it's just that they disagree with the. Let's say arbitrarily, if Pastor Vince and you had a drastic difference of opinion over theology, he might decide, you know what, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean making him wrong, does it?
No. It would have to really be drastic.
Well, it happens all the time.
That doesn't happen here all the time.
Not here, but in other. I've been to several churches where they've had splits.
Yeah. Here, we don't fight over dogmas so much, and one of the reasons is we don't spend a lot of time teaching dogma. And the reason we don't is, like I always say, dogma divides people. And we have different thoughts in our leadership on doctrines. And that's okay with me. It doesn't bother me. However, the church has a stand that we take, and if you don't agree with it, then it's just a case of get on board. You got to get on board with it, because this is what we're doing. For now, and it may change down the road, but for now, this is what we're going to do. It's the influencers you have to be careful of are those that they're almost always in lower levels of leadership, because we do see the potential there, and we raise them up. And people are funny because there's two types of people. When you start raising them up into position, we found that there's really only two types of people. First, let me say this, nobody is ready for a position when you raise them up. Nobody is ready for that position. You see the potential, you raise them up, and they're going to do one of two things. They're going to go one of two directions. They're either going to grow into the job, and that's only if they have the maturity to do so, or they're going to spin out. And when they spin out is when we have problems, because now you've raised somebody up into this position, maybe a deacon or something, so everybody in the body recognizes they've been recognized as a leader, and now they're spinning out and they're drawing people with them. And, you know, it would be nice to say everyone's ready for the job when you raise them up, but nobody is ready for the job when you raise them up. You don't even know what the job is till you get into it. And then you go, well, no one told me about this. Gee. If the Lord had told me what pastoring was, I would have run 100 miles an hour the other direction. I'm serious. But Kath.
Well, I was just going to say, through the years, we've had many influencers come in with a following, and then they leave with their following.
Yeah. Yeah, if you see a large group of people come in at one time and there seems to be one person at the head, that's the influencer. And they brought all these people out of their last congregation for whatever reason, whether it was legit or not. You have to now figure that out. But I will tell you this, normally it's not legit stuff.
And then they follow them out.
And then when they get upset with you and they leave, most of the crowd goes with them. Yeah, and it's really, I mean, it's as predictable as the sun coming up tomorrow morning. I mean, when you've seen it enough times, you can spot it a mile. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when it's all coming down. And so our strategy, now, we're kind of getting off course here, but our strategy at that point in time, we really only have two options. We either cut it off at the root as soon as we see it, or we try to nurture them and get them to grow up and mature out of it. And Kathleen and I have always opted for the latter, to a fault, I might add. But I think if I'm going to err, I think I'd rather err to that side than cutting them off the knees without giving it everything we've got to salvage them. And people say, well, I would do it this way. Well, I understand what you're saying, but we do this, and this is why we do it. The what?
It wouldn't be godly to just cut it at the root right off.
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether it would be godly. You're going to spare a lot of other innocent people if you do. So there's an argument to be made both ways. It's not an easy decision. This is why you need to be praying for your leadership, because these are difficult issues. Do we cut this person off the knees and save this group, or do we try to grow them up? And we have, and our leadership is split on this. This is why we have bing, bang, and boom on our leadership. You can imagine where bing, bang, and boom fall. And the rest are more the voice of reason. Peggy's in that bing, bang, and boom. It's me, Pastor Paul, and Peggy. We're the ones that'll cut you off at the knees. Then Pastor Vince comes in with the voice of reason. And of course the three of us get mad. And this is what gives us balance. This is what gives us the balance that hopefully we're hitting. Last one, and then we got to move on.
Well, you taught many times that this is a journey and the importance of it. And I don't know if everybody can remember when they first received the Lord, we thought we had found the truth.
Yeah.
The only truth.
Yeah.
And we wanted everyone we knew to have that same understanding and that truth. And we would argue and as we got a little older and a little more mature, the Lord has told us, you are part of my body.
Yeah.
And I use this person in this area I'm going to use you in another area.
Yeah,
And guess what? You're both right.
yeah,
Even if your understanding isn't exactly the same.
that's right. There's at least 38,000 versions of the truth.
So even though you're a big toe, I still love you.
Thank you,
Not
Bill.
you, not you.
Oh, not me, okay. What am I? We don't even want to get into that. All right, let's move on. Okay, so Roman numeral number 2. Boy, we're moving right along, guys. A matter of perspective. Ever heard the term, it's all relative? That's a true statement. Yeah. It's all a matter of perspective. Remember, all the spies, including Joshua and Caleb, saw this exactly the same things. They all saw the same things. They all came back and reported the same things. Yeah, the cities are fortified. Yeah, there's giants. Yeah, the produce is incredible. Yeah, the land is awesome. So they all reported these same truths, these same things that they had spied out. So the matter of perspective comes in when we read here, as they're illustrating what they saw, as they're sharing what they saw, and from this perspective comes the 2 reports. That's letter A in your notes. The 2 reports. Now, there's going to be 2 reports, and the reports are not the first part of this. We spent time on that. I want you to get that. It's not, when they say the cities are fortified, that is not negative confession, guys. You know what negative confession is, in my opinion? It's when you go around, oh, woe is me, woe is me, woe is me.
The sky's falling.
The sky's falling. That's your message. That's your only message. You're a bummer. What can I say? How many people, have you all met a bummer? Man, you just don't want to be around them. Why? They're likable people, but they're always given a bum report. It's like, dude, you're making me crazy here. It's always negative. It's always the sky's falling. No one wants to be around that type of person. And then their report just gets worse because now they're being ostracized. And nobody likes me. Well, what do you think? Right? So the cities are fortified. This is not the negative report. The negative report now comes down to verse 30 and 31. Caleb says we need to go in right away because we're talking ourselves out of this. How many of you have ever talked yourselves out of something that God said to you? I'll bet it's every person in this room. He's spoken something and you talk yourself right out of it. It doesn't matter what God said. You convince yourself this was last night's pizza or something, but you're not doing it. Doesn't matter what it is. I remember the first time I got a super touch from the Lord, I received a healing. A word of knowledge came forth at one of Brent Baker's meetings, and he said there's somebody up in the back with an eye problem. And my eyes had just been kind of getting weird during that period of time. And I thought, well, that couldn't be me. There's 2,000 people in the place. I go, and we got the last 2 seats. Remember that, Kath? We got there, and it was full. They turned us away, and then they found 2 seats for us. And so we went in, and he calls, there's an eye problem up in that corner. And I go, well, that couldn't be me. Why would that be me? And he kept saying, where's that eye problem? Where's that eye problem? And I kept saying, it's not me, it's not me. And I started shaking in my seat. it's not me. And I started burning up and crying, everything. It was, Kathleen looked at me and thought, what's going on?
Well, I had you on one side, and we were so squished in. I had this man next to me, and I won't even tell you, he kept spitting in his handkerchief, and I was like, what's going on here?
And I was shaking, and I kept saying, it's not me, I know it's not me. And I could I was holding myself in my chair, honestly. I had my hands under the chair holding myself because I wanted to get up and run down. And then he said, and then he moved on to some other words, and the whole feeling went away instantly. And then I knew it was me. And I knew the boat had already left the dock. So I said, Lord, have him call that out and I'll go up. And right away he turns back, where's that eye problem? And I jumped out of my seat and ran. This was the first time I was slain in the spirit. I mean, we were just out of the bike scene only a couple of weeks. And then 50 people at the altar, and they're all falling down. And I said, if he pushes me, I'm going to punch him out. I'm serious. I still had ponytail. I still had my long hair. I was still a biker at heart. Black leather jacket. I only owned engineer boots in those days. So, and there I am, and these people are falling out, and I'm going, no. If you think I'm laying down in front of 2,000 people, I'm the Fonz. I am way too cool for this. I'm not laying in front of 2,000 people. Not happening. And I went down before he even got to me. He was still 15 feet away, and I fell down. And I'm laying there, and I go, wow, this is nice. And the Lord healed me. You know what I mean? But we talk ourselves out of things, don't we? And he doesn't always come back. I've noticed that. There's times when that feeling goes, you blew it, Charlie. It's gone. You don't get another shot at it. And that frightens me. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that person.
So this may seem a little ridiculous, but and I kind of feel like maybe I've talked myself out of a potential blessing, right? But because it has to do with the lotto. And I just kept feeling like it was the Spirit, telling me like, hey, just go and get, don't go and spend hundreds of dollars on it at all. But then I would have a lot of numbers, in my work, things like that, where they're come in a row, 1111, or on the mileage on my truck, because I have to read the mileage on my rig every day. And I just kept getting this understanding, like I'm not even thinking of lotto. I'm not daydreaming of, how it would be to be in Maui right now. Like nothing like that, right?
I'm dreaming about that.
The only problem that I do usually have when it comes to material things is that I tentatively have an envious eye, right? To a newer truck. I want a truck and this and that. But I already know that I'm not getting one. Anyways, long story short, I just was like, no, I didn't care how many sequential numbers came up and things like that. Like I was just like, this can't be from God. Like this is not.
Well, let me say this. Every young believer thinks they're going to play the lotto and get rich. Every single one.
I spent $1. I still haven't bought a ticket.
Now, could the Lord do that? Of course he can.
Yeah.
But I do want to tell you this. It usually is a sign of our youth in the Lord. Being young in the Lord. We had a guy in our fellowship years ago that went to Las Vegas. He thought the Lord told him, go to Vegas and you're going to come back rich and, of course, give 10% to the church and all that. So he went, came back busted. We bought him a little plastic piggy bank. Remember that? It was a piggy bank slot machine. And he was an ordained pastor. So I mean, can God do that? Yeah, He can. You know, but.
He usually wants us to work for it, really. Right?
Well, there is an ethic in work. There's no doubt. So all I can tell you, you know, now you know what? If I woke up one day and the Lord said, "Go buy a lotto ticket," and these are the numbers, I would do it. But the reason I would do it is because I move in word of knowledge. But normally I wouldn't go buy one if it was just a weird thing. I would have to believe I heard from the Lord in order to do that.
If in doubt, then it probably.
If in doubt, it's probably you. Yeah.
The key is, if you're going to pray to win the lottery, God's going to answer back. Give me a break and go buy a ticket.
Yeah, I don't pray on it. It just kind of felt like it kept. You know what I mean? It's kind of get that one.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. I thought you wanted me to use the mic.
Right.
I just kept feeling like this. I mean,
Yeah.
like sin works in the same way, right? Where it's like I'm not even thinking of anything, but then boom, here comes these
Yeah.
ugly thoughts. You know.
That's why
and
we
I'm
take
just
every
like,
thought captive.
and I'm just not even there, and yet I'm battling these thoughts out of my head.
That's why I said if I got a thought like that, I would discern whether I felt it was the Lord or not. No, no, it's good.
I think one thing that's worth mentioning significantly, and we've had discussions about this, is that significant wealth outside of an extremely God mature, developed character to handle that sort of thing. Wealth always destroys. And if it doesn't destroy the person who acquires it, it will destroy the family who inherits it and didn't work to acquire it.
Right.
And a lot of people wish and want, pursue the wealth. And you really need to realize that this world is crap. This world is garbage, and everything that it has to offer is garbage. And you think, well, if I get the money, all my problems will be solved. You get the money, you're going to get problems you never even realized coming.
Yeah.
If you ever seen the movie, I like old movies, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Okay, it does. And even if you think you've got greed defeated, once that money comes in, you'd be surprised where this greed comes from.
Yeah.
The evil of our heart. And I think, you can take a person who's been faithful to the Lord all their lives, lived in relatively modest poverty, this, that, or whatever, loyal, faithful, dedicated. They come into money, and guess what? Here comes the destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really important thing to consider. It's nice to dream of all these things, but you got to look at the downside that comes with it.
Oh man, Gary's been after me to do another seminar on how to handle money, and I may do that. I just haven't had time to work on that yet. It's a very, we're teaching these financial things. Well, what if you come into a lot of money? I don't want to see you corrupted by that. Because money corrupts, or can. It has the power to corrupt very quickly.
99 out of 100.
Yeah. So.
Just real quick, I think the test is, I always tell Bruce, well, if the Lord gives you that, are you willing to give it all away? Because maybe it's not for you. So there's the test. Don't be thinking, what am I going to do with it? You'd have to think, okay, Lord, what is this for? And who is it for?
Yeah.
Maybe you're just a funnel.
Even the money I've been praying for, the $2 million, people say, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know.
But I ask you, what if it's not for you?
Yeah. We have no plans. Everyone else has a plan for it, I know that. The IRS has a big plan for it.
One of the ways I look at it, a lot of people see money, wealth as a solution to problems. They see it in lots of different ways. But all it is a tool.
Yeah.
Like a hammer, like a saw, like an axe. It's just a tool to accomplish certain things. And whatever money, it's not my money.
Right.
I'm just a steward of my Father's money. And we get to be so stingy about, he gives us all this stuff, and then we're stingy about giving him 10%.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not faithful in the small things diligently, you aren't going much further. But be careful, like with the lottery stuff, sometimes the enemy will give you exactly what you wish.
Yeah.
Because that's the cycle of destruction of how the enemy works. He will give you some of those heart's desires, even with the greatest intent prior to.
Mm-hmm.
He always promises, goes all the way back to the beginning. What did Lucifer promise Adam and Eve?
Yep.
You won't die.
Yeah.
It's always a lie. It's always deception. And he is willing to give you your heart's desire because you'll never keep it.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of acquisitions in life come from the enemy. Not all from God. You got to just know that. Just because somebody gets a new car, a new house, doesn't mean it's from God.
But it was for Sheila. It was for me.
Yeah, and obviously it can be. Okay, can we move on? Okay, thanks. I'll get you next, okay? I got to move on here or I'm in well, I'm not in trouble. I already have the answers. You're in trouble. Okay. Okay, it's a matter of perspective. 2 reports, letter A. Number 1 is there's a report of faith. And number 2, there's one of faithlessness. Okay? And how many know that all of us bring forth those 2 reports all the time? The good news for us is in 2 Timothy 2:13, even when we're faithless, he remains faithful to us.
Amen.
What a promise that is.
2 Timothy what?
2 Timothy 2:13 and 14. Even when we're faithless, he is faithful. Amen. Because listen, you can be a very mature believer, but you are going to have moments of faithlessness. It's just, we're human beings. And it'd be nice not to ever have that, but everybody does. And I don't think you're ever going to escape that this side of heaven. As long as you got this body, you're going to have to deal with these issues, I believe. So, one of faith, one of faithlessness. Now let's define these. B, here's how I want to define faith for the sake of this teaching. Faith beholds the real world with all of its problems. But interprets with a steadfast confidence in God's ability to transcend
Wait, after confidence. A spirit of what?
a spirit of optimism. Oh, I'm sorry. I went right over that, didn't I? A spirit of optimism with confidence in God's ability to transcend every obstacle. So faith beholds the real world with all of its problems, but interprets with a steadfast confidence, a spirit of optimism, and confidence in God's ability to transcend every obstacle. This is what we see. This is how we see Caleb moving. Because Caleb comes back with the same report. The cities are fortified. The people are gigantic.
Let's go get him.
Let's go get them. See, he has that optimism in the Lord, not in himself. How many know you can have optimism in yourself that's just downright dangerous? It's faith, the optimism has to be placed in the Lord, not in yourself, not in your own abilities. So that is how I would define faith for the sake of this argument. In C, let's define faithlessness. Faithlessness also sees the real world.
Also what?
Also sees the real world, but interprets with a lack of confidence.
No, sees the real.
Interprets with a lack of confidence, a spirit of pessimism, and lack of confidence in God's ability to transcend the obstacles. So faithlessness also sees the real world, but interprets with a lack of confidence, a spirit of pessimism and lack of confidence in God's ability to transcend the obstacles.
So, sorry, and lack of confidence in the last part? God's ability to transcend.
Yeah. Yeah, a lack of confidence in God's ability to transcend the obstacles. Janie.
I have been known many times as I think about how I pray and how I interact with the Lord, or how I interpret the word, or how I try to, make my requests known unto God. And I have learned over the past, maybe, I'm guessing about 5 years, that crying out to God is a good thing. Expecting God to answer my prayers is a good thing. That's scriptural also. Believing that God will answer my prayers. But I have had a tendency to always put in the thing before the request. Now, Lord, if you will just do this one more thing, then I will be able to walk in faith. And I'm learning over the last 5 years that no, I build my faith now knowing that trials are going to come anyway, but it's my faith that I rely on over a long period of time, not if God pulls the rabbit out of the hat for this particular incident.
Right. Yeah, immature faith is looking at individual events. Mature faith is a marathon. You're in for the long haul.
Amen.
My faith in the Lord is not dependent on what happens today or tomorrow. Good, bad, or ugly. Because it's all going to come. If you're breathing, all that's coming. It's just how it is. And I wish I had another story, but this side of heaven, I don't think there is another story, because we live in a fallen world. And not just we fell, the whole creation fell. That's what the word teaches. So it's not even a matter of escaping California or whatever. You can't escape. You have to deal with it in the midst of it. Does that make sense? And Abraham, okay.
I kind of wanted to touch on what the lady said there. I have a tendency of doing something similar myself in my prayer, and or even when other brothers or sisters have a prayer request, right? And say there's something troubling me, I'll pray over it, right? And my confidence is in the Lord, most definitely. And the confidence is in the Lord. But then I always have on the back burner the reality of knowing that my prayer might not be granted. And then, and in that sense, sometimes brothers have expressed like, well, that's your lack of faith. And I'm like, oh no, that's my reality. Is me recognizing that I live in a fallen world, and then I go into discerning if certain prayer requests, whether healing over a family member or a relationship, etc., doesn't seem to be manifesting, then what is it that the Lord is trying to teach me? Why isn't this being granted, right? Like, there has to be a reason on that. And then another thing, when you mentioned circumstance, I have a thing that I had written down while I was away, that if faith is based on circumstance, then you're never going to be walking on a solid foundation.
Right.
But yeah, what I was saying as far as prayer and my confidence in the Lord and having that on the back burner, what would be is that a sense of lack of confidence or maturity in my faith, or?
It's a very fine line, and it can be crossed many times, because you always know the facts that are going on in your life, okay? And it comes down to this whole thing that we're talking about here. This is why we're focusing on this today, because this is a huge issue. Caleb realizes that if he as they focus on these facts, they're starting to slip away from their confidence in the Lord. And you've got to take every thought captive and do the same thing. You're focusing on the faith, and you're also focusing on the facts. You're back and forth. So as you sense that it's starting to pull you away from the faith in the Lord, you have to take that under control and take that thought captive. I use this example a lot. You know, if I have a headache, think about this for your own life. If you have a headache and you pop a couple aspirin, you know what I do after I pop the aspirin? I don't think about the headache. I go about my day.
You put your faith in the pill.
The aspirin doesn't heal it right away. You still have the headache for another whatever. What happens is you readjust your focus, and then at some point in time you realize the headache's gone. It's been dealt with. You can't even tell when it left most of the time. Now, I can also guarantee it, but the same token, just the flip side, if you take 2 aspirin and then you start thinking about the headache and thinking about the headache and thinking, it gets worse. Doesn't it? Think about that. So faith, in my opinion, is this. You go to the Lord, you pray, you seek His face. None of the facts change immediately. If they do, that's a miracle. And if it's a miracle, you're not even moving in faith anymore, because the things now seen is no longer faith. Right? So if you receive a miracle from the Lord, you got to find something else to have faith in, because this thing's done. Right? So what happens is you go to the Lord in prayer, you come out of your prayer closet, and you stop thinking about this. You get on with life. You get on with the Father's business, whatever that is. Then what happens is you look back and you go, oh, it's gone. When did it leave? I don't know. It's just gone. Praise God. And you give God the glory and you move on. It's really simple like that. The problem is when we get, you're in your prayer closet, you come out, you're moving in the right direction, and then the doctor calls. And it pulls you back right away. Okay, there's no sin in that. You don't have to start yelling over the phone, and calling this guy, blasphemous non-believer and get behind me, Satan, and all that. You don't have to do that. It pulls you back because now you're reminded you've got this issue going on. What do? Hear the report, go back to God, and get on with the Father's business. And you're going to be pulled back and forth how many times in life? I mean, gee. For somebody to say that you're in faith, now you're out of faith. Now you're in faith. Now you're out of faith. I just want to throw my hands up and quit. To me, I'm not out of faith here. I'm being challenged to reignite the faith and not fall into something bad. I haven't lost my faith in the Lord. I haven't lost my faith in the ability to heal. I'm not siding with the devil. I've just been drawn back to this place, and now I have to take that thought captive. Isn't that what the Bible teaches? Take the thought captive and move on.
Sharon will tell you that I'm not quite ready to teach a class on positive thinking. I let her fill in the blanks there. But there is there's a video I may or may not recommend, but it's Jocko. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he's got one video where he said, "You name it, whatever happens, it's good." And it's really powerful. Just go, it's good.
Yeah.
Everything that happens is good. And we have different perspectives, because I can look at you, I'm not pointing at you, I'm looking over. I can look at you, and you've had a job for 40 years working for, name a company.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have no idea what it is to trust in the Lord for your daily bread.
Right.
And that's not bad. And he would answer me, well, the Lord has provided this job.
Yeah.
Yes. But you have no idea what it's like to not know
Right.
when the phone's going to ring, when you're self-employed, when your next buck's going to come in, how you're going to manage that.
I know.
So learning to manage that, all is good, is really important. And the same with this issue here. Maybe I'm a little less hard on these guys, because Joshua stood in front of the Lord.
Yeah.
Take your sandals off. You're standing on holy ground. And come on, this guy's got a different deck he's playing with.
Yeah.
And you can't expect the next guy who hasn't had that experience have that same level there. They may have a more faith someplace else or whatever.
That's so true.
So we all are at different places in our walk for different reasons. Just look at everything that happens as good.
One size does not fit all. I always say that. And it's also, you're learning the lessons you need to learn. You know, so God's going to take you through experiences that I may not be entering yet, or maybe I entered whenever and already went through them. So we're not, the problem is, it's like Sharon was saying, when you first came to the Lord, you wanted everybody to believe exactly like you believed. Well, immaturity in our Christian faith still demands that. You need to believe like I believe. Well, no, you really don't. The objective here is to believe like Yeshua believes. And who knows the mind of God? Nobody. Let me get Maria, and then I've got to move on. Okay.
Didn't Israel have this problem again when they came up against the army of the Philistines? They had just one little tiny giant, and they didn't want to fight them until David came.
Yeah.
So it was the same thing, but they didn't get punished like the people in the wilderness got punished for 38 years.
Right. But they didn't see the miracles that the people in the wilderness saw. Bill was saying that they were playing with a different deck. And we have to remember that. That's a really good insight. Playing with I like that term too, playing with a different deck. I mean, to whom much, the word says this, to whom much is given, much is required. So if you stood in front of the burning bush, more is required of you than somebody that hasn't. It's just that simple. And we forget that, because when we get into the thing of faith, we think, well, it's the same for everybody. It is not the same for everybody. It never has been and never will be. Faith is an individual thing. And it's based on where you're at with God. And even if you've been walking with God for 100 years, you can still not be as far progressed as somebody that's been walking with the Lord for 20 years. Just depending what you've done with that time. That's why the word says, redeem the time. I can look back on my Christian walk and I can see there's times that I wasted. And that's one of those things where the Lord goes and he doesn't come back. You don't get another shot at that. That was downtime and you blew it, Charlie. Simple as that. So now you're here instead of being here. The good thing is we're going in cycles. I like what Pastor Paul always reminds us. We're going in an ascending cycle. We're making aliyah. but you're always going around. That means, like the children of Israel, you're going to come right back to the same things. We're going to talk about, if we have the time, we're going to talk about that today.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Well, I just had a comment to make, because years ago you wanted us to pick a life verse.
Yeah.
And to me, when I think about the faith, that sometimes we have to remember to go back to that life verse, because that's what remember about our faith sometimes when things are all going bad.
Yeah.
And mine is 8:28, Romans 8:28, that I know the Lord is going to make all things turn to good for those that love Him. I love Him. I know that no matter what I'm going through, He's going to turn things around.
Yeah.
And our life verse is so important for those that haven't picked one, that I didn't get it right away when you said it. But it was years later, and even the one I picked it first was not really truly my life verse, I don't believe.
You know when
It
you
changed.
found your life verse.
I knew I found my life
Yeah.
verse later. It wasn't right then.
And all things work together for good. That's just what Bill was just saying, that Jocko it talks about. If you believe the scriptures, then you believe that. See, now, I dare say that not all, we haven't arrived at that, any of us yet, completely. Does that make sense? We still look at things as good and bad. You know, that was a bummer. That was not good. And yet God can turn it around. Now, my faith assures me that He can turn it around. I really don't have a problem with that. But to initially attack it as being good, typically I don't go there initially. I go, this is a bummer, and I don't like this. I struggle. You know that I struggle with that politically. I mean, our president, you know. You know, it's a problem. I mean, you know, but is God in control? See, so these become difficult things, guys. I've got to move. I'm sorry. I know you got great things to say, but what can I say? Let's move. Letter D. The evil report. Now, evil report is anything not of faith. The Hebrew here, Ra-dibah, D-I-B-B-A-H, would be the transliteration. Ra-dibah means bad or evil talking about something. Okay? And Ra-shem is talking about someone. Okay? Ra is bad, of course. Lashon hara means the evil tongue, right? And when you're talking about, how many know you can be speaking bad or evil about something? That church down the street, or whatever. Or you can be talking about someone, which is Rashem. Okay? So, this becomes the evil report when you either start talking bad or evil about something or someone. So everything's included in this. There's no escaping the evil report. You don't have to be talking about a person to be speaking the evil report. In fact, the spies really were talking about more things. You know, the cities, the people are fierce, the giants, you know, and the land devours its people, you know. So talking about things. So this is the bad report, the evil report. Is anything not of faith? And what is the faith? Not denying the facts. The faith beholds the real world with all its problems, but interprets with a steadfast confidence, a spirit of optimism and confidence in God's ability to transcend every obstacle. And that's what Caleb said. Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, we ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There is no question we can conquer it. He's putting his faith in God's ability to transcend these facts. And the other guys go the opposite direction. No, we can't go. They talk themselves out of it. We can't go because of the facts. Caleb says, because of the facts, we should go immediately. How many know time is not on our side? Ever. Time is against you in every circumstance I can think of. So this is why he says immediately. He says, guys, we should go right now. That's quite a statement when you think about it. We should do this right now before we change our minds. Because you guys have already changed your mind. I'm only about a half a breath away myself. Do you think he was just bold and pulling his suspenders out and going, oh, I'm the man of faith here? No, I think he was worried for himself. Because attitudes are contagious. They get on you. You go, man, we got 12 spies and only 2 of us think we can do this thing? What are we, lunatics or what? Have you ever thought you were a lunatic when you're dealing with something that's requiring faith? I have, many times. I thought, that's crazy stuff. And even after it's over, I go, what was I thinking? Right? How many have ever experienced that? That's the essence of faith. All right. Now in letter E, how do you spread evil reports? Well, there's several ways you can do it. You can do it intentionally. A lot of people do that. No, these aren't blanks. These are just some extra things I'm giving you. You can spread evil reports intentionally, and people do that. They have hidden agendas. They want to come against you, so they find negative things. How many know you can find negative or positive in anything or anybody?
Even the word.
Yeah.
Use it out of context.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can do it intentionally to build our case or to make ourselves feel better. We spread evil reports by dwelling on negatives. Philippians is very clear about what you should be dwelling on. You need to be dwelling on things that are good and right and pure and holy.
Amen.
And that's work. The reason that sounds like work? Because it is work. If you just go into your no thinking mode, you're going to default to the old man. You can't afford to go there. You have to create a new default, so that when you're not actively engaged in thinking, your thoughts are fairly godly. We can spread evil reports by letting natural facts outweigh the spiritual facts. They're both facts. They're both true. Right? But one can outweigh the other. You've got to tip the scales in favor of faith every time. In fact, the Talmud says this. This is, the Talmud has some pretty corny things in it. Man, it has some pretty good things too. Like everything, right? The Talmud says this is one of the good things. One who spreads evil reports almost denies the existence of God. Because think about the spies. They're saying, we can't go up because the people are too big. You're denying that God's even in the equation. How can you take something as large as God out of any equation? Think about that for a bit. And yet we do all the time. We take him right out of the equation. That makes sense? Let me finish this and I'll take a couple of comments. So in letter E, disbelief and disappointment and faithlessness all come from an evil report. And those three things, disbelief, disappointment, and unfaithfulness and faithlessness, lead to disobedience.
Can you repeat those again? Sorry.
Disbelief, disappointment, and faithlessness Disbelief is an easy one for us to understand. You either believe something or you don't. Leads to disobedience. But think about disappointment. I submit to you that the devil traps many of us right here in disappointment. We set ourselves up for a fall. And the way we do that is we read the word, for instance, we go into our prayer closet with our expectation of what we want the outcome to be. Now, you're never going to get rid of that. You want certain outcomes. Come on. To deny that is just being a nutcase, right? You want certain outcomes. And whether, they're really not the best for you or not is not even the point. You want a certain outcome. Somebody's sick, if one of your loved ones is sick, you want them healed. You don't care if God is using it to teach them something. Teach them some other way. I want them healed. And I want them healed now. Not 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. I want them healed now. And then we find the scriptures that support that notion. Because you can find scripture to support any notion. Right? So we gather those scriptures in, we build our case, we present it to God, we point out His word to Him. Well, you have to, Lord, it says right here. Well, let me tell you something about our God. He doesn't have to do anything for anybody. Ever. He answers to no man on any topic. He keeps His word, absolutely, but how many... You and I, of all people, have learned that the way we understand the word has not been correct. Haven't we come to understand that? So, are we misinterpreting some things today? Yeah, you can bet on it. So, here's the point. This disappointment, we set ourselves up because we're wanting and we're expecting God to move in a certain direction, and then He goes another direction. We don't lose our faith in the Lord. We still believe, but we are disappointed. And disappointment leads to disobedience. Well, I'll show you. Or, what's the point? What's the point in tithing? I'm just going to keep all the money for myself. You will, but at the moment you don't care. Because you're going to teach God a lesson. He shouldn't be messing with you. Most of us, don't have the gumption to say that, but we're acting like it, right? So this disappointment. So the enemy, he can set us up through disbelief or disappointment or faithlessness, and it all leads to disobedience. And the scripture that we had in our parashah, we won't read it for sake of time, was Numbers 14, 1-4. These guys go home that night, they go back to their tents, and they all repent. True repentance, guys. This was true repentance.
The crying and the wailing?
The next morning, they come back, and they're ready now to take the land. And Moshe says, don't go, because the Lord's not going. They go anyway. They truly repented. This was a total turnaround. This is exactly what the Bible teaches you're supposed to do. They did it. Moses said, nope, the ship already left. Don't go, because you're going to go right off the pier into the water. It's not going to be good. They go anyway, because now they're getting behind what Caleb was saying the day before. Don't we do that? And so they charge in there. So you can see that this disobedience, their obedience to the first word is on, but now they're being disobedient to the second word, which has now superseded the first one.
Wow, that's wild. I have never caught that.
And that's how the devil gets us, because we don't catch these things. We think, oh, I repented. God is probably so tickled pink right now he can hardly stand up. He's just so proud of me, and we charge in. And then we experience failure or whatever, which sets us up again for more disappointment. Well, I repented and I did what I was supposed to do. What are you doing? Don't we go through that? Of course we do. So the devil sets us up. So we got to watch this. There's so many lessons to be learned here.
Well,
I'll take some questions now, and then we're going to close it out.
do we know, since the
Yeah, you got to use the mic. Sorry. Bill's wearing his mask. I'm glad to see that on his elbow.
Didn't say where to wear it.
Yeah.
do we know exactly the timing of the spies going into Canaan, and since they left Egypt, I mean, since the killing of the firstborn, they left the very next day, correct?
Yeah.
And then they saw the parting of the sea,
Right.
and then God spoke to them audibly
Right.
and with thunder and lightning, and he gave them the first 10 commandments. Where are we at now? And this happened in a very short period of time.
Yeah, just weeks.
Just weeks, that's what I thought. And I know they didn't have the Holy Spirit within them, but seeing all these miracles, it just seems hard for me to understand how they would not believe God.
Well, we see lots of miracles. We do it all the time.
Okay, they were pretty big miracles.
They were. But let me tell you something about miracles. Miracles will not change you. They just don't. What changes you is the Word of God building godly character. Miracles only last so long, and then the human mind can't even remember whether they were actually even real or not. You know, we have a diary we wrote on our motorcycle trip when we first got married, and I read it now and I go, "Wow, was that true? That is out there." And you go, "No, I would have never done that." Well, yeah, you did. It's written down. You did it. And you can't even remember it. You kind of remember it, and you kind of go, "Well, I'm not sure that's why I was doing it." Or yeah, see, you can't relate anymore. I mean, people, you hear a good message on Shabbat, 72 hours later, most people can't even tell you what the message was. I can't even. I have to go to my notes and go, "What did I teach on last week?" I'm serious. Yeah, I know. That's why we keep Maria around, to let us know where we're really at. Yeah, I know. Bill.
10 years ago.
I don't have any facts to back up this opinion, but you can be kind of harsh on God. It just doesn't seem to be fair. I mean, these people truly repented, like you said, and then he lets them go up and get slaughtered. But I have a hunch that a missing piece is like, remember the 6-Day War?
Yeah.
They attacked on Yom Kippur, correct?
Oh, no, that was 73 war.
73, I meant.
Yeah.
So the Israelis were total. I mean, outside of a miracle, they couldn't have survived that because nobody was at their posts, and they just got totally overrun, for a time.
Yeah.
So
They were warned.
yeah, but I'm saying they picked an opportune day. So my point being is, God maybe there was a big, huge party and everybody's drunk. So this is the day you got to go in because you're not strong enough to beat them.
You're on the other side.
Yeah. He's not swinging the sword for you. He's telling you what to do, and by faith you go in and you do it. So I'm thinking there was something going on there that day had to be the day. And the next day, sorry guys.
It's very possible.
I didn't punish you. just the facts.
Yeah, it's very possible. And it really wasn't even God punishing them in the most literal sense. They went against an enemy they couldn't defeat on that day. Like you said, God's timing, guys, is as crucial as his direction.
Amen.
I've come to learn that. If you miss you can be right, you can be dead on with direction, but if you miss the timing, you're in deep trouble. You're out of God's will, oftentimes. So we've got to be able to discern what we're supposed to do and the timing. And it's like you said, maybe that was an opportune time for Israel to attack the giants, and then the next day it wasn't opportune anymore. Highly possible. We don't know. We're not told, but we are told that they were told, "Don't go now," and they went. That's disobedience, even though their disobedience was brought forth by their repentance. Guys, it doesn't get much more confusing than this. And this is real life. This is how we're dealing with the Lord. And so we've got to really pay attention. Microphone.
So, I mean, because that is a little bit confusing, and it's almost like
More than a little bit confusing.
yeah, and then and I've come to terms that, like, even with my child, he's 12 years old and he doesn't believe. Anyways, what was my point? That in that sense is when we miss the mark or something, or we come to repentance, we should just take ourselves back to square one and not move forward in what we think God wanted in the first place, because that time has passed.
Right. We make an assumption.
Just to try and keep myself on not getting slaughtered.
No, you're right on. That's very good. You got to take every circumstance and weigh it out. And don't assume that don't assume that what God told you to do yesterday is good for today. Because we've just seen right here, that's not necessarily the case. It could be the case, but we're wise if we go back to God now and go, okay, Lord. See, if they repented during the night, because it says that this was the next day.
They were doing it on their own accord, not by the...
Well, they repented. If they got up in the morning after repenting and said, okay, Father, should we go in? The answer would have been no. See what I'm saying? But they assumed that yesterday's marching orders were good for today. Just because God said it yesterday doesn't mean it's good for today. Guys, our faith is a moment-by-moment thing. And so we make these assumptions, and when we make the assumptions, then we get disappointed with the outcome. Kathleen and I are trying to teach each other not to make assumptions. We remind each other all the time, don't make assumptions. You're setting yourself up for a fall. Because your assumptions are more often than not correct. You build an assumption on the best knowledge you've got, but that's incomplete at best. And so you build this whole scenario in your mind built on incomplete facts, and then you're disappointed because it doesn't come to pass. Like I always say, you don't need the devil. You've got you. You could put the devil out of work right now. You've got you. That's why we got to get ourselves under control. If we can get ourselves, then it's 2 against 1 in the positive sense. Right now, it's 2 against 1 in the negative. We're losing the tug of war, but we find ourselves pulling on the devil's side. unknowingly. We don't want to, but we are.
A lot of things with assumption, a lot of times we don't pay attention to that which is not in Scripture, or details or things which are not
Right.
written.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of they repented, but they initiated going back on their own timing
Yeah.
rather than repenting and regrouping, because God may have said, go in it the day after tomorrow or next week.
Right.
I mean, he could have had that in mind.
Well, he had a plan. He always has a
But
plan.
that,
Yeah.
it goes back to,
Yeah.
in his timing, he will tell us what to do, where
Right.
to go, what to say.
Yeah.
It's easy to know those three, but like you said, oftentimes the timing, most difficult thing for me is the patience and the waiting.
Well, yeah, and he's trying to teach us patience through all of this. We used to sing a song years ago. It's called "In His Time He Makes All Things Beautiful." Remember that? It's a good song, and it was. Of course, we didn't realize the significance of it back in those days, but now I've come to learn that in His time, He truly makes all things beautiful. But it's in His time, not mine. And I'm still fighting. I still fight the Lord on timing. I have not submitted to God's timetable. I wish I could sit here and say I had, but I haven't. I want my prodigals home this week. What? I got to wait 5 years? I don't want to wait 5 years. I want it now. I want the healing now. I need your provision now. And I wrestle the Lord on timing, because time is against us. I'm to the point now where I'm starting to pray for my prodigals. Lord, I want them to return before we leave planet Earth. Forget about next Shabbat. I just want to see that come to fruition. And I've kind of noticed my prayer switching that direction as I get older, because time is against me. As we get older, time is against you.
Yeah, we're halfway through.
You're more than halfway.
Oh, 120. Okay.
Yeah, if you go with 120. The psalmist says 70 or 80, so
Well, we're already past that now.
yeah.
Some of us.
Can't. Yeah, after this one, we're moving on.
Gary said it's very easy to know. I mean, how are you supposed to know that that it's from God? You see? It's like, remember Floyd said to us twice at the congregation, I have a house and I'll only rent it to another believer. And I had a house, I was renting a place here, and I completely blew it off. I mean, I went to see it, but I didn't think it was from God. I didn't realize he was saying, move out, move in here. That he was saying to me, here it is, on a silver platter, from a great landlord, right?
Yeah.
He was saying, move in here. And I just blew it up.
Well, Gina got it.
Oh, God bless her. No, I mean, it took me years.
She's the one that got away.
Yeah.
You know what? This is why we have to seek the Lord with all of our heart, our mind, our soul, and our strength, and then He will allow you to find Him.
Right.
One quick little prayer. I mean, sometimes that does it, and sometimes it doesn't do it.
Right.
So you've got to just learn to wait on God and follow the leading of the Lord until you feel that this is what He's showing me. Then you move in it. Then even if you're wrong, you're still right because you moved in faith.
If you know.
So not if you know, if you believe.
Oh,
So if you believe this is the Lord and you go in that direction, you're now moving in faith And you, even if you're wrong on the technicals, you're blessed because of the faith. And that's where grace comes in.
Yes.
When you're wrong over here, grace doesn't work as well as it does over here.
Right.
Over here, there's a reaping and sowing that really transpires.
Right.
Okay? Let me move on. Okay. Turn to Numbers 14, 20 and 20 to 22. Adonai said, I have forgiven you as you have asked. But as sure as I live, and that the whole earth is filled with the glory of Adonai, none of the people who saw my glory and the signs I did in Egypt. Now he's dividing. This came up earlier, remember? Because now he's dividing those that are under 20, that were under 20 when they left Egypt, with those that saw the signs. Do you see this? This is a different deck. To quote Bill, this is a different deck. So none of the people who saw my glory and the signs I did in Egypt and in the desert, yet tested me these 10 times and did not listen to my voice, will see the land I swore to their ancestors. None of those who treated me with contempt will see it. Isn't that interesting? There's a double, I'm going to say double standard here, not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense. Because the people that saw the signs and wonders in Egypt now were dealt one deck. Those that only heard about it are dealt a different deck. And the ones that were dealt the first deck, they're not going into the promised land now. This train has left the station. Period. Does that make sense? So this is very important. So in Roman numeral 3, we see that Israel tested God 10 times. This becomes very interesting. We're going to talk about this. 10 times. Okay? I'm just going to give you these very quickly here. This is the list the rabbis have come up with. At the Red Sea, they tested him. At the waters of Meribah, the first incident of manna and quail. Collecting too much manna. Gathering manna on the Sabbath. Water at Rephidim. Golden calf. That's number 7. Number 8. Taberah. Number 9, the second incident of manna and quail. And number 10 is the incident of the spies right here that we're reading about now. So these are the 10 times that Israel tempted God during the wilderness journey. Okay? And I'll leave this up here. You can come up and get the other 10. You can write these down. I'll leave my notes open here so you can see them afterwards if you want to check that out.
Did you have the sin of the golden calf?
Yeah. Golden calf is number 7. Okay. So these are the 10 times. Now, 10 is the number of testimony. This is why if there's 10 Jewish men living in a city, they had to build a synagogue. This is their testimony, that the gathering of the saints won't be forsaken, right? So this is why if you can find 10 men in Sodom, I won't destroy it. So 10 is this number of testimony, okay? Now, in this testimony, the testimony tells a couple of things. And it's interesting because how do we beat the devil? By the word, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So this testimony thing is very interesting. So 10 is the number of testimony. That's letter A. Number 1, testimony means completeness, nothing wanting. Nothing wanting. And it also carries the idea of number 2, a union with God's grace. Now, the reason I say this, union with God's grace, is because 2 is the number of fellowship, right? If 2 or more gathered in my name, there I am present. If 2 or more agree on anything, It shall be done. It's testimony, it's union, it's choice, it's agreement, coming into agreement. And of course, the number 5 is grace. So what we have here is 2 times 5 is 10. And so you've got this fellowship is double grace. Okay? It's a double grace. This is what testimony brings forth, is a double grace. So, for instance, when you are healed and you go up and you testify before the congregation, there's a double grace involved. What is it? Well, you're giving God glory, but you're also building another person's faith, all at the same time. It's a double grace. It goes both directions. You're glorifying God and building people's faith all at the same time. This is why we beat the devil this way. Okay? So, with this double grace now, let's look at Abraham in letter B. Abraham was tested 10 times. He's the father of the faith, isn't he? So, if the father was tested 10 times, guess what? You're probably looking at some testing. Yahoo. Oh, joy. Now, see, this is one of these areas where we get, I would like to just be born again and not be tested ever again. That sounds pretty good to me.
Boring.
Yeah, well, you can have my 10. Yeah. Okay, so Abraham is tested 10 times now. And again, you can come up and copy my notes. I'm just going to read off what the rabbis come up with. Now, again, we can disagree with what the rabbis say. You know, they come up with the count on the Torah is 613. That all depends on how you break up the commandments and count them. You can get a lot of different numbers. So 613 is just the standardized what they've come up with in their codification or codifying, okay? What they say the 10 tests of Abraham was the call from his homeland. 1, 2 was the famine in Canaan. And remember the famine in Canaan. He got to the land where God showed him, and he leaves. Remember that? He leaves because there's a famine. He had expectations, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he gets there and nothing's flowing. See the problem? Have we ever done that? Yeah. Of course we have. Well, Abraham's real problem started when he left and went down into Egypt. Right. And they followed him for a long... He got blessed there, though? He got blessed. He got his socks blessed off, but he also went through lots of problems.
And he sinned.
And we're still dealing with some of the problems that he started when he went down into Egypt. It's called Ishmael. It's called Islam. It's a huge problem today. It's probably going to blow the whole world to kingdom come one of these days. You know what I'm saying? Because he went down there. Okay? Okay, so the famine in Canaan. I like the way the rabbis put this. The abduction of Sarah in Egypt. She wasn't abducted, guys. She was sold by her brother, Abraham, the father of our faith, that mighty man of God. I better not catch any of you selling your wives off. It won't go as well for you.
Pharaoh committed adultery.
Yeah. The war with 4 kings, one of the tests. The long wait for a son and his marriage to Hagar. The commandment of circumcision is number 6. Number 7, again, the abduction of Sarah by Abimelech, a second time. Oh my, in the land. Oh. Does this sound like our life? How many times are you going to do the same stupid thing? How many times are you going to sell your wife to the king?
Many times.
As long as the money's coming in.
I'm not selling my wife even once. When she came back, I would be dead meat. Number 8 is the exile of Hagar after she gave birth. That was a test. I mean, you know. The exile of Ishmael, his firstborn son. And then number 10 is the sacrifice of Isaac. So these 10. Now I shared with you, I gave you a little sneak preview. 4.5 of these are failures on Abraham's part. He failed the test 4.5 times out of 10. I don't know about you, but that gives me some hope.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
So the first one, the first one, the call from his homeland was half win, half lose. Why do I say that? Because he was told to leave his father's house, and he brings his father with him. And Lot, which presented problems later. He was supposed to leave all that and go on his own. He was afraid to go on his own, probably. You know, that's a big trip. You know, what? I'm going, I don't even know where I'm going. You want me to go alone? Well, let me at least bring my dad and my nephew along and some others.
And whatever wealth that he had.
And whatever wealth, yeah. So this was a half win, half lose. Half a failure here. The famine in Canaan, this was a loss. I mean, he was brought, and then somebody mentioned earlier, we have to go back, I think it was you, we have to go back to where we were. He was brought back to Canaan, to where he got off course. When you get off course, God's going to bring you back to the last time you heard from him. You know, so if you heard his voice and then all of a sudden you did your own thing, you're going to come back to that place where you heard his voice. Now, he may tell you something different now, but you're going to hear his voice once again.
Yeah, I was saying to go back to square one and not do as the...
That's the idea. The third one, he fails. The abduction of Sarah in Egypt. That was definitely a failure. I mean, that was blatant. He was afraid. And I'm not saying... I mean, I don't want to be too harsh with him, but that was nasty. And by the way, you know, the rabbis tell us that she was probably in captivity with the king for close to a year. This wasn't a 3-night adventure. The reason they think that is because the king comes back and says, none of the women in our kingdom are getting pregnant. What's going on? So 9 months they needed to really figure this out. At least, because there was pregnant women in Egypt when she went down there. So they say it was probably about a year. This wasn't, you know, I'll see you in the morning, babe. Oh, that's not what this was. This was crazy. So this was a failure. The commandment for circumcision, 4. The war with the 4 kings, success. He did good. The 5th thing, the long wait for a son and his marriage to Hagar, failure. Big failure. We're still paying for it. 6, the commandment of circumcision, success. 7, the second abduction of Sarah by Abimelech, failure. 8, the exile of Hagar after she gives birth, success. 9, the 9th test, the exile of Ishmael, success. And 10, the sacrifice of Isaac, success. So you can see how this goes. And he had these 10 trials. Now, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to give you the scriptures here. In letter C, Daniel's guard is tested for 10 days. He tests God for 10 days. This is Daniel 1, 8 through 16. Remember, Daniel says, I don't want to eat the king's food. Put me on this diet and see if I'm not stronger. So the guard says, okay, I'll give you 10 days. So he tests God for 10 days. So Daniel's guard is tested for 10 days in this. Okay? At the threat of his own life, by the way. You know, when one of the guards of Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do exactly what the king says, you're risking your head. Okay? In 10, in Zechariah 8:20-23, we're told that 10 Gentiles will hold or test one Jew. So you can see this number 10 is very interesting. And then in letter E, God's people are tested in Revelation 2:10. We're going to be tested for 10 days. Not all of God's people. It says some of my people will be tested, thrown into jail for 10 days, thrown into prison for 10 days. 10 days.
Prophecy isn't a day a year?
A day is 1,000 years. A day is like 1,000 years.
40 days, 40 years?
Yeah, but in this case, it says a day. The what? The Peshat is 10 days. There's a more spiritual significance, I'm sure. But we are told in Revelation 2:10 that some of you are going to be thrown into prison and tested by the devil for 10 days. So, and I've kind of made an assumption that that 10 days is between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, which are the 10 days of awe. So that would make sense to me. Now, whether that's the case or not, I don't know. So, and then in Roman numeral 5, it's interesting that traditionally it's believed by the rabbis that the rejection of God's people to enter the land, or the bad report, I should say the bad report of the spies, took place on the 9th day of the 5th month, which is Tisha B'Av. Okay, now Tisha B'Av this year lands on Sunday, August 15th. So this is when the spies would have given their bad report. What's interesting is the spies would have entered the land this coming Wednesday, June the 9th, on Rosh Hodesh, when the moon is dark, which makes total sense. Okay? Is that Fox News?
Sounds like
So this Wednesday was kind of marks at Rosh Hodesh marks a celebration of the spies entering into the land. August 15th is when they would have come out. Okay, now Tisha B'Av, of course, is celebrated in Judaism as a day of mourning, a day of fasting, because I was going to say ironically, but it's not ironic at all. You know, in fact, in the Talmud, it says of the people when they heard the spies' report, it writes, "You wept for no reason in the wilderness. Therefore, I shall set this day for you as a time of weeping throughout your generations." Tisha B'Av. Here's some of the things that have transpired on Tisha B'Av historically. Okay, the first temple was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290 on Tisha B'Av. They were expelled from Spain in 1492 on Tisha B'Av. World War I began on Tisha B'Av. Himmler signed the final solution on Tisha B'Av, and the deportations to the death camps from the Warsaw Ghetto actually started on Tisha B'Av.
And this is all coming this Thursday, or when?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Well, no. Tisha B'Av is August 15th this year. No, this Wednesday. Yeah, that's what I got on the calendar.
I think it's July.
Rob is in July the 18th.
July 18th. Av is after Tammuz.
Oh, maybe I looked at the wrong calendar then.
It was starting the month is Thursday.
Next year is a leap year, so maybe you did.
Maybe I just pulled one out of my drawer, so it could have been a wrong year or something. Okay, I apologize for that. So ignore the thing about this Rosh Chodesh. It's still Rosh Chodesh. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, so anyway, that's our